Hello guys, welcome to this brand new tutorial on Prisma. You might have come to this video because you might have seen Prisma being used with Next.js and React Server components, or even from a backend framework like Express. Whichever it is, by the end of this tutorial, you should have learned what is Prisma, why use it, how to set it up, and then later on, we will practically use it to interact with our database. Okay, so let's get started. So what is Prisma and why use it? Let's look at the first point. It is built for simplifying database interactions. Prisma is an ORM, or in other words, object relational mapper, or it can also be thought of as a modern day database toolkit for web developers that simplifies database interactions. With an ORM like Prisma, instead of interacting with databases using raw, difficult to understand SQL queries, you have an easy to use object-oriented interface. This makes working with SQL as well as NoSQL databases like MySQL, PostgreSQL, and even MongoDB much more enjoyable to work with. Some of the other examples of ORMs like Prisma would be Mongoose and SQLite. Let us look at the second use case for Prisma. Prisma provides type safety and catches data-related errors. It catches errors during compile time, so it helps you catch issues well in advance before your code even runs. You can use Prisma with regular JavaScript, but it is better suited for TypeScript as Prisma is built with TypeScript in mind. Let us look at the next use case. Support for various databases. It is typically used with relational databases like MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQLite. However, you can also use it with NoSQL databases like MongoDB. With Prisma, the code that you write, be it the models, the schemas, the APIs, will not change based on your database. For example, if you have used MySQL for your project at the start, and on a later date, you want to switch to PostgreSQL, you can easily do so with almost no code change. Let us look at the last use case. Automatically generates code based on your database schema. If you have used MongoDB or SQLite, you create schemas which represent the structure of the database tables. For example, to create a user schema, you might have to specify all of the fields like the ID, email, and name, if they are optional or mandatory, what their data types, and also their relationship with another table, etc., etc. Before ORMs like Prisma, we had to do it on the database level before we even started coding. But with Prisma, you just have to specify the models, and by running it, it will automatically create all the database tables, rows, columns, primary keys, auto increments, etc., etc. So now that we've got a pretty good idea of why use Prisma, let us actually see what are the components of Prisma. So there are three parts to Prisma. Let us look at the first one. Prisma Client. It is the auto-generated and type-safe query builder for Node.js and TypeScript. Basically, whenever you write models and schemas, Prisma Client helps you interact with the database much more easier and also make sure that the database queries that you write are type safe. It can be used with REST APIs, GraphQL APIs, or even Next.js full stack applications or anything else. It helps with auto-correction and type checking in your IDE. An exciting use case for Prisma is for Next.js apps with a new RSA architecture where Prisma Client can be used on React Server components. Let us look at the second part of Prisma. Prisma Migrate. It is formally defined as the data modeling and the migration system in Prisma. If you do not understand this, don't worry. Essentially, it is designed to simplify and automate the process of managing your database schema as your application grows. For example, you can start off with a user model with email and name. At a later date, you might have a requirement to add an isAdmin field to the model. In which case, by running Prisma Migrate, it will automatically make the necessary changes to your database while retaining existing data. Let us look at the last one. Prisma Studio. It is a GUI or a graphical user interface to view and edit your data in the database. This is the only part of Prisma that is not open source. The rest of it is completely open source. It is very useful to have, but absolutely not a requirement. So if you're somebody who's never worked with any of the other ORMs like SQLite, Mongoose, for example, then it is possible that you're not aware of what data modeling is. It is absolutely crucial that you understand this, as this forms the basis for a lot of things that we are going to be covering in this video. Data modeling is the process of defining the data requirements and the structure of a system. It usually involves describing the database schema, including tables, fields, data types, and the relationships between them. Effective data modeling in Prisma is crucial as it forms the foundation on which effective database queries are built on. It also assures that the data for your application is structured efficiently for saving, retrieving, and updating activities. So going forward in the rest of this video, to understand everything practically, we will be creating a user schema and an article schema. We will also form a relationship between a user and articles. So essentially, a user can have multiple articles, but every article should have just one user. So now let us get started with the coding. So these are the 4 commands that you will have to run to set up your entire dev project. Let's go to the VS Code. So let us actually first go ahead and initialize a node project. So to do that, you can say npm init and then put a y flag. So you can see that a package.json file is created for us. So now let us run the first command. So the first command is I'm installing TypeScript. So npm install TypeScript. And along with that, I'm also installing the TS Node package, and I'm also installing the types for Node.js. And I'm also telling npm that these are all going to be developer dependencies. So let's press enter. So now that this is done, let us come to the second command where we're initializing the TypeScript. So npx tsc init. So you can see that this creates a tsconfig file, but we're not going to be focusing too much on TypeScript in this tutorial. Now let us come to the third command, which is npm I Prisma. So let us go ahead and install Prisma right now. And let's also specify that this is going to be a developer dependency. Press enter. All right, great. So now you can see that we have the Prisma installed as well. Now let us actually go ahead and initialize the Prisma. So let's say npx Prisma init. And then along with this, I also want to specify the data source. So let me type it out and explain it to you. Data source provider. So basically this data source provider could be any of the databases that you want to work with. So it could be Postgres, it could be MySQL, it could be MongoDB. But for the sake of this tutorial, I want to keep this very simple for you guys, because I don't want you to go installing MySQL or PostgreSQL or MongoDB, and that is going to take a lot of time. So instead, I suggest we work with SQLite. SQLite is, as the name suggests, is a lightweight SQL database. It is going to be just a single file. But the code or the operations that you will be performing on it will be very similar to how you would on MySQL or PostgreSQL. The code that you will be writing is going to be the exact same, so don't worry about it. So let's press enter. Now, you can see that there's a couple of files that are generated. The first one is the env file. You can actually see that we've got the database URL and the location of the database file. So this is going to be created later on when we run Prisma migrate, which we will talk about in a little bit. But this is the place where you put in the connection string. So for example, if you're using MySQL, the connection string will go right here. If you're using MongoDB, the connection string of that MongoDB will go right here. Because we are using SQLite, this is going to be the location. We don't see it right now, but soon when we run Prisma migrate, it will show up. So if you see right here, Prisma supports the native connection string format for Postgres, MySQL, SQLite. So if you want to know more about it, you can go to this particular link. All right. And now let us look at the other folder that has been created, and you can find the schema.prisma file. So essentially the schema.prisma file comprises of 3 different sections. All right. So the first one could be the data source, which we have already seen. We have used SQLite to be our database. And then the connection string has been already pointed to this particular environment file. And this is where we are defining the Prisma client. This is what is going to help us interact with the database much more easier. We will talk more about it, but you don't have to worry too much about this because this is just standard boilerplate. Now, what is the third part? This is where we write the models. So let us actually go ahead and create a user table and an articles table and build a relationship between them as well. All right. So to create a user model, you can say model user, and inside of this, you will want the ID. So this basically just represents the user table. All right. So this is the schema for the user table. So in a user table, we will ideally want the ID, right? So we will want a unique identifier. So let us call it ID. And after this, we have to specify the data type. So we can say int, all right, because this needs to be an integer. And we also want to specify that this ID is not going to repeat, right? So no two users can have the same ID, right? So for that, you can say @ID, all right? So this defines a single field ID on a model, all right? So there is one more functionality that I want to add to this ID. I want this ID to auto increment, right? Every time there is a new user getting added, I want the ID to get auto incremented. So to do that, you can say @default, and then inside of this, I can say auto increment, all right? Now let us go to the second one. I also want the user to have a name, right? So the name could be a string, and you can actually see that it suggests a lot of different things. So if you choose the first one, the name is going to be mandatory. If you opt for the question mark, so the name might or might not come, all right? And obviously the third one is going to be an array of strings. So I'm going to use the second one. So I don't want the name field to be a mandatory field for the user, all right? I want the email, and I want the email to be absolutely mandatory, all right? And lastly, I want the articles field, and this is going to be an array of articles, all right? Now you see that this is showing red squiggly lines because it says that it does not refer to another model because we have not created an articles model yet, right? So let us actually go ahead and create that. Sorry, this is not going to be a plural, all right? Now, so this is going to be article, all right? So this model basically signifies the structure of the article table, right? So even article should have IDs, right? So we can actually use the same line here as well. Anytime there is a new article getting added, we would want the IDs to auto increment. We would always want the IDs to be unique as well. We can also add a title right here, and we can have it as a string. And the body of the article could be something like an optional string because we don't want the body to be mandatory. All right. And also we can have another field right here called author ID, right? And we want the author ID to be an int. Okay. Now, this is where we actually form a relationship between the article and the user models. So let us build that relationship right now. So to do that, I can say the author, and then we can say user, basically meaning that this author needs to be referring to a particular user. Now let's create the relation. To create a relation, just say @relation, and this method takes in two properties. One is the fields. So this takes in the author ID. And the second parameter is references, and this points to the ID of the user model right here. So basically this means that the author ID of this particular model, which is the article model, should be referring to the ID of this particular user model. So this is what this relation means. If you do not understand it, do watch it a few times and I'm sure you will understand it. So now that we've written the user model as well as the article model, let us now run Prisma migrate. So to run this command, you can say npx prisma migrate. And because we're in development, you can say dev, and we can also give it a name called init. Pressing enter. And you can now see that a new file has been created, right? So if you go inside of this migrations and go inside of this folder, you can see that SQL commands to create both of these tables are written right here. How beautiful is that, right? So we don't ever have to write these ugly looking, difficult to understand SQL queries by ourselves because Prisma does it automatically for us, right? So we just have to write these models and run a migration, and Prisma is automatically going to generate all of the SQL queries for us. Along with this, we can also see that the SQLite database has been created as well. We will not be able to see it, but there are some third-party VS Code extensions that we can use to see the data, but we are not going to be doing that right now. Later on in the video, I will be showing you how to use Prisma GUI, which is the graphical user interface for Prisma. So now let us actually go ahead and start interacting with this database. So let's go ahead and create a file called index.ts. So to interact with the database, you will need Prisma client. Okay, so let's import that. Prisma client, and let's initialize the class as well. So new Prisma client. So because we are working with a Node file, let us actually go ahead and create a main function right here, we can also specify this to be an async function. Okay. So coming down here, let's invoke main, and at the same time, let's do a then and a catch. So instead of then, let's write a callback function. So essentially, whenever the main is done executing, we want to disconnect from Prisma. So to do that, we can say Prisma dot $disconnect. Okay, so one more thing that I've forgotten is that the disconnection is an async operation. So we will have to add async and await right here. So let us do the same thing here as well. And here we will be getting the error message, and you can actually console or console.error and then put it right here. And then we will also have to disconnect from Prisma. And in addition to that, because this is the catch block, it would also be helpful if we exit the node process with the proper exit code, which is 1. Now, for the first query, let us actually try creating a user. So to do that, we can actually say that const user, and let's await it. And we can say Prisma dot user. So you can see that it automatically auto suggests the user model, right? Because the Prisma client is connecting us to the Prisma models that we've written right here. So that is why it auto corrects us. Okay. So we can create a user by saying dot create, add an object inside of it. So I'm going to say data, an object here as well. And inside of this, I can actually specify the name. I can mention Harish right here. And we also know that the property email is missing because we've made that mandatory. So let us add the email here as well. So I can say harish@gmail.com. So now that we've entered all of the necessary properties, you can see that there is no red squiggly lines. All right. Now let us actually console the user and then see if it has actually been added or not. So let us actually go ahead and run this file. So to do that, we can say npx. And we know that this is a TypeScript file, right? So you have to say ts node and then specify the name of the file right here. So let's press enter. You can actually see that it prints it out. It says the ID is going to be 1 because this is the first user that we've created. It starts from 1 and the name and the email is added as well. So this is the data that is sitting as the first field inside of our database right here. We'll not be able to see it still. So let us do one thing. Let us actually fetch all of the users that are present in the database file right now. Okay, so fetch users. All right. So to do that, we can say const users and then await Prisma user. So to fetch all users, you can use the method find many. All right. So to print this out, we can add users right here. And I want to comment this out. And the reason why I want to comment this out is that every single time I run this command, this file is going to get executed and multiple entries with the name Harish is going to get created, which I do not want. Okay. Now let me run this. Great. You can actually see that we are getting an array of objects right here, right? So it works fine. Now let me comment this out as well. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to create an article associate with a user. Okay. Because we know that articles always need to have a user, right? So let us do that. So we have article and let's await this. Prisma article create. Inside of this, as usual, we have to specify the data, and an article should absolutely have a title, right? So we can say Harish's first blog or article or something. Okay. We don't want to have the body because we have mentioned that that needs to be an optional thing only, right? So the next thing is we have to associate this article to a particular user. So to do that, you can actually specify the author right here. Okay. So the author, and then I can use the connect object right here, and then I can specify the ID to 1. So basically what this is saying is connect this particular article to the user with ID 1. So let us run it. Let me replace the articles right here. And if I run this again, let's make sure that everything else is commented out. Okay. So if I run this, you can see that the article has an ID of 1. We've got the title here as well. And here, this is the most important part. Here you can see that the author ID is 1, right? It is successfully mapped to the user with the ID of 1 right here. Okay, so that is what this means. So let us now test it out. See if this article has actually been created in this database. Okay, so let me comment this out now. And we can write another command, or a query rather, right here, saying that fetch articles. Okay, so we have articles, Prisma article, and find many. Okay, so we have the articles right here. Let's run this now. Perfect. You can see that we are getting an array of objects and we have the first article inside of it. Now you might have a question. So right here, we mentioned the author and not the author ID, right? So when we fetch that, shouldn't we also be able to see the author object right here? We can, all right? We just have to explicitly tell Prisma that. We just have to say include and then create an object, author and true. Let us run this again. Great. You can actually see that along with the ID, title and body, we're also getting the entire object as well. So far we've created a user. We saw how to fetch those users as well. And then we saw how to create an article and associate that with a user, right? So we're first creating an article and we're associating that article with an existing user in this particular case. But right now I want to do something else. I want to create a new user and a new article at the same time. Okay, so let us see how to do that. Let me comment it out. So I can call this create user and article at the same time. Okay, so let's do that. Const user await prisma.user.create, and I can create an object inside of it, and then I can say data, and we know that every user should absolutely have an email. So we can call this Yamini at gmail.com, and we can give her a name as well, Yamini. All right. So we know that this code is going to create the user, but at the same time, we also want to create an article and associate. All right. So to do that, you can say articles and then create. And inside of this, we know that every article should absolutely have a title. So we can say Yamini's first blog. And let's also give it a body. Why not? So we can say this is Yamini's first blog. Okay. Now let us actually log this user out. So if I run this, you can see that a user has been created with the ID of 2. You can see that it has been auto incremented as well. And we've got the name and we've got the email as well, right? So let us now actually fetch all of the users and see if this item has been added. So let me comment this entire thing out, and I can go back to the fetch users right here. Okay, so let's uncomment it and log this out. So ideally we should have 2 users right now. Beautiful. You can see that we've got Harish and we've got Yamini right here. And this is an array. If you also want to see the associated articles, you can do so by mentioning the include keyword right here. So you can actually mention the articles to be true. Let me save this, and if I try to run this again, you can see that we're getting the articles array as well. So because we're logging it out in the terminal, because there is not a lot of space, you might not be able to see the full nested object. So to help with that, there is a small code snippet that I've created. So let me actually comment out this particular line right here. So if I run this command again, you can see that it beautifully lists out. So you can see that this is the user's email, and this is the article. Okay, similarly, this is the second user, and we've got the article and the body. So essentially, I'm just taking the user's array, looping through it, and then I'm consoling logging it in a very neat way. That's it. So here, Harish has got 1 article, Yamini has got 1 article, right? So let us now try to add another article to Yamini. All right. So what we can do is come down here. You can say create another article for a user. Okay. So we can say article await prisma.article.create, and inside of this data, assign it to an object. We know that the title is mandatory. Let us say Yamini's second article and associated with the user. So we can say author and then connect. And then inside of this, we want the ID to be the second user, right? This article needs to be associated with the second user ID. Let's run this one. Let's make sure that everything else is commented out. We can comment this part out as well. Let us run this. You can see that a third article has been created. So it says ID is equal to 3, but then it is associated with the second author ID. So if I now uncomment both of this code, fetch all of the users, and let me comment this code here as well. We don't want to create another article. So users. So let's run this again. Perfect. Here you can see that Yamini has 2 articles right now. Now there are a couple of things pending. Let us now see how to update certain operations. All right. So let me comment it out. Here we can now try to update a user's data. Okay. So we can say user Prisma update. So here you might have to use the update method right here. Okay. So what to update, right? So to mention that, we can use where right here, and we can say the ID needs to be 1 or 2 or 3, whichever user that we want to update. So let us say I want to update the first user right here. So let us say I want to update the user's name. So I can mention data right here, and then I can say the name needs to be now Tarun. All right. Let's print it out again. So essentially what we're doing is that we're updating the user's name right here to this name. All right. So let us actually run it. So it says that it has been updated. We'll actually test it out by going up here. Let us uncomment the fetch users and let's print it out. See if it has actually worked. All right. Let's run it again. Perfect. You can see that there is no more Harish anymore. We've updated this particular field name. Now let us see how we can delete something. So we'll try deleting an article. Okay. So we can say article and then await Prisma article delete. So instead of this particular update keyword, we're now going to use the delete method. So what do we want to delete? We can just mention where, and inside of this object, we can say we want to delete the first article or the second article or the third article. So we can say article number 2. So let me console this out. See if the deletion actually succeeds. And here you can see that this article has been deleted. So the second article belongs to the author ID 2, which has now been deleted. So if we were to now fetch all of the users, so if I were to go to this users right here, if I put this here, let me comment this out. So if I run this again, you should effectively see that this second user, Yamini, only has one object inside. Okay, so the second article has been successfully deleted. So one more thing that I want to show you guys is the Prisma GUI. So to open it up, type npx Prisma Studio. And you can see that it automatically creates a different tab right here, right? So inside of this, you should be able to visually see all of the database tables. So right here, you can see that we've got the article table and the user table right here. So inside of user, we had Tarun as well as Yamini, right? And each of those users also have one article associated with them. So as you can see, Tarun is associated with this particular article and Yamini is associated with the Yamini second article title. Similarly, you can go back and you can click on the article table, and here you can see that we've got 2 articles right here. You can also go change the author of each of those articles. So for example, you can actually go here, instead of Yamini, I can actually change it to Tarun. So now this particular article is going to be associated with the user Tarun right here. To save this particular change, you can go ahead and click on this button. You can also add a new article by clicking on this add record button. And you can see that this ID is going to be auto incremented. So you're not going to be able to change that. And for title, you can actually say something like hello world, right? And body, we can just leave it as empty because this is optional. And for the author ID, you can either specify it to be 1 or 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and specify the user ID 2. We can just go ahead and save it. So now because of this change right here, we've got 3 articles in total. So you can actually fetch it from our code as well. So you can actually run the same command right here, and you can actually see that we now have an additional article right here, right? We've got a total of 3 articles right now. And that is it, guys. I hope you learned how to use Prisma effectively. Prisma is a very popular choice for backend, especially if you're working with Next.js. So if you're interested in learning Next.js and React Server components and effectively use Prisma in it, I have a dedicated Next.js 14 playlist if you want to learn that as well. So do drop a comment and consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.